Have you ever noticed how sometimes the brightest spirituality, the most sincere self-sacrifice, or seemingly the purest pursuit of good can cast a shadow? Not just a faint haze, but a deep, impenetrable darkness that makes you shudder with a sense of inauthenticity. Reflect on this. When was the last time you encountered someone who, cloaked in a mantle of righteousness or a halo of enlightenment, evoked not admiration, but a sharp, almost physical revulsion? Perhaps it was a guru whose words of universal love sounded like a cold judgment, or a philanthropist whose acts of charity felt like a subtle yet suffocating noose of control. Their smiles are flawless, their speeches polished to perfection, their aura seemingly so transparent that all the mysteries of the universe should shine through, yet something within you screams, false. It's like looking at a digitally filtered photograph, unrecognizable, where every wrinkle, every flaw, every living feature has been erased to create an ideal yet lifeless image. You see not a person, but a meticulously constructed avatar, designed not so much to inspire as to dominate, not to heal as to subjugate. And this filtered, sterile purity, which should bring peace, instead evokes an itching sense of unease, almost nausea. Why then does this seemingly enlightened inauthenticity provoke such a powerful, almost furious reaction within us? It's not about them, not about their hypocrisy, nor their hidden motives. It's about us. For what causes us the most burning revulsion is often the most accurate mirror. Their shadow is merely a bolder or more desperate manifestation of our own invisible cage, the very one in which we once imprisoned our most vibrant, wildest, most untamed parts. This searing aversion, this internal resistance to another's polished facade is not a weakness, but a compass. It's not just irritation. It's a distress signal emanating from the depths of your own psyche. It's the indignation of your inner exile, the part of you whom you long ago banished, labeling as unacceptable, dangerous, or shameful. Every manifestation of another's shadow that we feel so acutely is a key to our own. Within this angry reaction, this itching sense of injustice, lies a map to our own treasures. It points to those parts of ourselves that have been exiled, locked away in a dungeon of shame or fear. When we recognize their shadow, we begin to see the contours of our own, the one we've so diligently hidden beneath the mask of a good person. And so when this wave of recognition recedes, we are left with a heavy, unavoidable question. Why does this particular shadow cast by light resonate so strongly? What ancient pact was made within us that forced us to banish entire parts of our essence, to imprison them in a dungeon, to conform to some ideal? At what point in our inner landscape lies the scene of the very first transgression? That moment when we decided that to be whole, to be truly ourselves, meant to be bad or unworthy. Within each of us lies an invisible archive holding the whispers of the first prohibitions. We spoke of a mirror reflecting our shadow in others, but when was this mirror first clouded? When did a verdict echo within us, excommunicating parts of our wholeness? Recall that inexpressible moment when an innocent, natural desire, be it genuine ambition, a healthy drive for excellence, an instinctive assertion of boundaries, or simply the right to make mistakes without ensuing searing shame, suddenly turned into an unbearable, burning sensation. It wasn't always an external rebuke, a stern glance, or direct condemnation. Often it was an internal whisper, echoing lessons learned from early childhood. You can't do that. That's not good. Good children people don't act that way. This invisible self-imposed verdict became the first stone in the foundation of that internal dungeon where we exiled our most vibrant, most authentic parts. You were taught that the path to light, to acceptance, to love, lies through relinquishing your inconvenient qualities. You were shown an ideal, sinless, selfless, always smiling, always ready to serve, completely devoid of ego, and in striving for this radiant yet often sterile image, you began methodically to sever everything that didn't fit into this meticulously constructed yet painfully artificial picture. You learned to suppress healthy, vital aggression that defends your boundaries when they are threatened. You branded ambition as vanity. You concealed your vulnerability, fearing rejection or exploitation. You forbade yourself to make mistakes because good people are always flawless. Thus, your inner exiles were born, those parts of you that craved recognition for their achievements but were branded as vain and proud, those that felt righteous anger at injustice but were labeled as evil or aggressive, those that wished to make mistakes and learn from their own experience but were forced to strive for flawlessness, for an unattainable ideal, those that sought true intimacy through pain and vulnerability but were taught to hide their cracks, their true fragility. They didn't die. They were simply locked behind the walls of your meticulously constructed virtue, in the basements of your consciousness, in the dark closets of your soul. There, in silence and oblivion, they were destined to wait until you dared to look at them again, until you recognized their right to exist. It is precisely these exiled, unacknowledged parts that form the shadow cast by your carefully cultivated image of a good person. This shadow manifests as hidden pride concealed behind feigned modesty, as the shadow of a lust for power disguised as service and care for others, as the shadow of manipulation cloaked in good intentions. Because energy that doesn't find an outlet in its natural, healthy manifestation inevitably becomes distorted and expresses itself through circuitous, sometimes destructive forms. It doesn't disappear. It merely changes guise, becoming what we feel so acutely in others but refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. This process of exile, this internal verdict, is not a unique drama. It's a deeply ingrained mechanism familiar to anyone who has ever tried to conform to superhuman ideals, forgetting their own multifaceted and contradictory nature. We've already touched upon the paradox of virtue's radiance casting the densest shadow, and how our own sharp rejection of this inauthenticity serves as a mirror for our internal exiled parts. But how exactly does this mechanism work, which transforms the unacknowledged into a projection and the suppressed into a distorted reflection, visible only externally? The principle of the shadow is universal. It spares neither the righteous nor the sinner, neither the enlightened nor the lost. It is rooted in the very core of human existence, in the ancient fear of being rejected, of being cast out from the tribe. Imagine, from our earliest days, we learn what is good and what is bad, what is acceptable and what is not. We crave belonging, warmth, approval. And when some part of us, be it anger or vulnerability or ambition or even simply the desire to be imperfect, receives an internal verdict as unworthy, dangerous, unacceptable, it doesn't disappear. It goes into exile, into the dark corners of the psyche, like a wild beast driven away from a warm campfire. This is the metaphor of the inner exile, a part of the soul forbidden to step into the bright territory of the conscious self. And this act of banishment, this internal judgment, is often more cruel than any external court, for it occurs in the silent dungeon of one's own consciousness. But the exiled energy doesn't die. It doesn't merely bide its time. It actively seeks an outlet. It's like the energy of an unpaid bill that sooner or later demands payment, not with money, but with distorted manifestations in reality. When we don't acknowledge certain traits within ourselves, pride, a desire for control, envy, aggression, these qualities don't dissolve. They are projected onto others. We see them in someone else, and our revulsion or admiration becomes disproportionate, irrational. We feel that what we so fiercely condemn or blindly idolize is embodied precisely in another person, failing to understand that it's merely an echo of our own unaddressed inner landscape. Recall the ancient Greek myth of the Minotaur, a monster born of forbidden passion, hidden deep within the labyrinth. This is not merely a fairy tale, it's a metaphor for our psyche. The Minotaur is our inner exile, that aspect of ourselves we deem too ugly, too dangerous, too shameful to face. We build a labyrinth of denial and suppression around it, hoping that if we don't see it, it doesn't exist. But it does exist, and it demands sacrifices. It demands tribute, the energy of our lives, our relationships, our sincerity. This tribute manifests as hidden pride, as a pursuit of power disguised as service, as the manipulation we feel so acutely in others but refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. This invisible Minotaur, this shadow, continues to live in the depths of our soul, waiting for courage or desperation to compel us to descend into the labyrinth. And it is precisely those who appear most flawless, who erect the highest facade of holiness or virtue, who often conceal the most powerful and hungry Minotaur. The shadows they cast can be particularly corrosive because they are the result of suppressing the soul's most potent impulses. But what specific forms does this shadow take in the context of altruism and spirituality? Which archetypes, born from these noble aspirations, evoke the strongest internal resonance within us, the sharpest sense of rejection, or conversely, blind adoration? As the veil of the idealized self begins to thin, silhouettes emerge, chillingly familiar, yet equally repulsive. These are not merely external shadows. They are phantoms generated by our own exiles, embodied in those we encounter, especially in realms where purity of intention seems absolute. We spoke of the Minotaur hidden in the labyrinth of the psyche, but now it's time to look at its guises, at the archetypes that provoke irrational aversion, like a mirror reflecting what we have forbidden ourselves. Look closely at them. The first is the spiritual guru manipulator, one who preaches unconditional love and freedom, but builds an empire from submissive souls. Their words flow like honey, promising enlightenment, healing from all ailments, a path to truth that, of course, lies only through them. They are charismatic, radiant, full of wisdom, but behind this shining facade lurks a thirst for total control, financial or emotional. They don't just lead, they own. The irritation they provoke often stems from our own suppressed desire to influence, to be heard, to be recognized, but also from the fear of being consumed by another's will. We despise their power because we fear our own. Next appears the self-sacrificing martyr, whose life is one of endless service and self-denial. They are always ready to help, to shoulder another's burden, to give their last, to sacrifice themselves for a higher purpose or the well-being of others. Their speech is full of humility, their gaze deep sorrow for the world. But look closer. In their eyes, an unspoken reproach can be read, and in every act of self-sacrifice, a hidden demand for recognition, admiration, or even guilt can be felt. Their altruism is passive aggression, a thin thread by which they bind others to themselves, making them hostages of their goodness. They evoke an irrational desire to flee because we sense how they unconsciously try to strip us of our freedom, to impose the burden of their sacrifice upon us. This rejection can be an echo of our own suppressed right to refuse to set boundaries, to an egoistic but healthy no. And finally, the all-knowing righteous person, an individual who doesn't just follow certain spiritual or moral principles, but knows the truth. They are ready to teach, condemn, correct, pointing out others' errors and sins from the height of their infallibility. Their words are dogmas, their gaze a judgment. They don't doubt, they don't seek, they merely assert, clad in the armor of their correctness. They evoke a dull resentment because their certainty seems offensive and their judgments unfair. We hate their arrogance because perhaps we ourselves have exiled our right to make mistakes, to doubt, to our own imperfect truth into the shadow. Allow me to give an example of such a figure. I knew a man, let's call him Master Elias. He was known as an enlightened teacher whose lectures drew thousands. His words were pure, his teachings profound, promising liberation from suffering and a path to inner peace. He spoke of non-attachment, of humility, of true power lying in the absence of worldly ties. And people believed. They sold their homes, quit their jobs to follow him, to donate to his center of enlightenment, which grew and expanded, consuming more and more land and resources. Behind the scenes, however, Master Elias lived in luxury, inaccessible to his followers. He demanded absolute devotion, broke up families if anyone dared to question his words, and manipulated people's emotions, skillfully playing on their fears and hopes. His unconditional love turned into an iron grip, and liberation into total dependence. What caused irrational revulsion in some of us was not his teachings, but how they were used as a tool to satisfy an insatiable thirst for power and recognition, hidden beneath the guise of spirituality. It wasn't merely deception, it was a perversion of the very nature of humanity's yearning for light. And so looking at these demons exiled into the shadow, at these archetypes whose presence wounds us so acutely, we begin to understand that each of them is merely a distorted reflection of some powerful yet suppressed force within us. What if what we so despise in them is the key to our own, as yet unrevealed, true power? Our previous exploration lifted the veil on figures from whom we instinctively recoil: the charismatic guru, the tireless martyr, the unwavering righteous soul. We saw them not as external anomalies, but as distorted reflections, mirrors held up to our own inner landscape. However, merely identifying shadows is only half the journey. True alchemy begins when we delve deeper into the labyrinth, not to slay the minotaur, but to understand its essence. For what we perceive as a monstrous flaw, an exiled demon lurking in the depths of our psyche, is often merely a grotesque mask worn by a vital, unacknowledged force. Consider the guru manipulator. Their shadow is a thirst for power, control, hypocrisy. But what if this distorted energy is an echo of a desire for true influence? What valuable capacity have you forbidden yourself, exiling this vice into the shadow? Perhaps it's the right to leadership, to vision, to the realization of ambitious ideas, to the ability to guide others without suppressing them. The fear of becoming someone who exploits others can paralyze your natural charisma, suppress healthy initiative, and cause you to relinquish your own power to transform the world around you. You have exiled from yourself the right to be powerful, to be seen, to be someone who shapes reality, fearing that any manifestation of this power will inevitably turn into tyranny. But true leadership doesn't dominate. It serves, directing energy towards creation, not subjugation. Reclaiming this exile is not about embracing manipulation, but about restoring your capacity for healthy influence and constructive leadership. Next, the self-sacrificing martyr. Their shadow is passive aggression, the expectation of recognition through suffering, and inability to make direct requests. And here the question arises, what valuable capacity or right have you forbidden yourself by rejecting this image? Perhaps it's the right to vulnerability, to self-care, to setting healthy boundaries, to directly expressing your own needs without guilt. The fear of being a burden, selfish, or weak compels us to wear a mask of selflessness, suppressing our own pain and needs until they erupt in a distorted form. You have exiled from yourself the right to receive, to be needy, to be a person whose own reservoirs require replenishment. Reclaiming this exile is not about cultivating victimhood, but about recognizing your self-worth, your ability to accept help, your willingness to show genuine compassion for yourself before extending it to others. And finally, the all-knowing righteous person. Their shadow is pride, judgment, intolerance of dissent, inflexibility of beliefs. What valuable capacity have you exiled, fearing you would become such a person? It could be the right to your own convictions, to an unwavering inner truth, to clarity of judgment, to the ability to see the essence of things and defend it. The fear of being judgmental or wrong can lead to the blurring of personal boundaries, to abandoning your own inner compass, to constant self-doubt. You have exiled from yourself the right to deep knowledge, to wisdom, to your own opinion, fearing it would lead to arrogance and isolation. But true righteousness does not judge. It illuminates. Reclaiming this exile is not about embracing dogmatism, but about restoring your capacity for deep intuition, for unwavering clarity, and for the courage to live according to your authentic inner truth while allowing others to walk their own path. Each of these demons is not a curse, but a distorted message about a hidden gift. The task is not to destroy them, but to decipher their language, to return the exiled parts to the wholeness of your psyche, transforming them from poisonous projections into life-giving resources. For it is in this integration that the key to genuine power lies, capable of manifesting in the most noble aspirations without casting its own shadow. Without this internal work, even the most sincere intentions can lead to unpredictable consequences, entangling us in the webs of our own unconscious game. There are images that evoke not just aversion, but a deep, almost physical irritation, not those that are overtly bad, but those wrapped in the shimmering fabric of virtue, yet through which something false, something predatory emerges. You recognize them, sinless in word, yet dominant in every gesture, preaching humility yet craving adoration, promising enlightenment yet only multiplying the shadow of their own ego. This is not merely hypocrisy, it's something far more subtle and insidious. It is the very shadow of the good person. Altruism turned into manipulation, spirituality becoming a tool of control, the pursuit of light giving birth to pride, as dazzling as it is destructive. We see them on self-help stages, in the spotlight of spiritual gurus, in the endless feeds of social media where virtue is put on display like a rare trophy. And something within us constricts, protests, echoes with a dull, unpleasant resonance. And this isn't just a dislike of another's inauthenticity. It's much deeper. Imagine this irritation is not an external criticism, but a kind of internal radar, detecting not only dissonance in another, but also resonating with something long suppressed within yourself. As if every pompous phrase, every meticulously crafted smile, every call for unconditional love masking cold judgment is a high-frequency signal awakening your own deeply buried inner exile, the one who was once you, but whom you yourself or the world around you forced into the shadows, the one who was too ambitious, too assertive, too vulnerable, too inconvenient for the ideal image you tried to create. And now, seeing the manifestations of this shadow in others, you feel not only revulsion, but also involuntary recognition and almost painful contact with your own repressed truth. This reaction, this surge of indignation, this itching sense of injustice, it's not weakness. It's a beacon. It's a key. It's not just a signal of another's untruth. It's the pulse of your own, yet unintegrated power. It's the cry of the part of you languishing in captivity, seeing others, however distortedly, manifest something you have forbidden yourself. But why do these specific images provoke such sharp aversion? Why does their shadow cast such a long silhouette on our own perception of the world? Why does what seems to be a manifestation of the highest virtue cause such intense internal conflict within us? The answer, as always, lies not in the external plane, but in the depths of the internal. To understand this, we must journey back to the origins, to the very place where the first transgression against the integrity of your own self occurred, to the moment you learned to exile parts of yourself to become good in the eyes of the world. We spoke of the Minotaur lurking in the labyrinth of our psyche, of those exiles who, being suppressed, distort the brightest aspirations, projecting their shadow onto the world. But what happens when this shadow, unacknowledged, unintegrated, returns to us like a boomerang, resulting in personal collapse precisely where we aimed for the greatest good? Let's look at this with ruthless honesty. Imagine the leader of a spiritual community whose sermons on unconditional love and brotherhood resonate with sincere passion. They call for unity, for serving one's neighbor. However, behind this facade lies an unacknowledged thirst for control, a fear of losing power over minds and hearts. They are afraid of becoming like the guru manipulator from our previous reflections, whose shadow is so repulsive. And so in an effort to avoid this fate, they make decisions that appear good, but in reality only reinforce their hidden control. They avoid delegation, suppress initiative, calling. It preserving the purity of the teachings. Ultimately, instead of a thriving community, a fragile structure emerges, dependent on their sole will, doomed to collapse once their energy wanes or their hidden motives become apparent. Their good intentions, unpurified by the shadow, led to spiritual stagnation and disillusionment. or take a person whose life is dedicated to selfless service to others. They work tirelessly, giving their last, denying themselves everything. They are afraid of becoming like the self-sacrificing martyr who uses their suffering for manipulation, inducing guilt in others. Their fear of being selfish or demanding causes them to suppress their own healthy needs for recognition, rest, and personal boundaries. The result? Chronic burnout, a deep, hidden sense of resentment that gradually poisons their interactions with those they serve. Their sacrifice becomes not a source of strength, but a black hole that drains energy from themselves and those around them, leaving behind only bitterness and a sense of injustice, their good intentions, not having passed through the crucible of self-analysis, turned into personal suffering and ineffectiveness. And finally, one who tirelessly strives for spiritual purity, for infallible truth. They deeply study texts, meditate, practice asceticism. They are afraid of becoming like the all-knowing righteous person whose intolerance and judgment are off-putting. And so their fear of becoming dogmatic causes them to avoid any healthy expression of certainty in their truth, any healthy condemnation of injustice. They become overly tolerant of compromises, of false teachings, fearing to judge or impose their viewpoint. Their spiritual path, intended to lead to clarity, transforms into quicksand of doubt, in which they lose their inner core, their ability to distinguish light from shadow, and ultimately their pursuit of truth becomes fruitless, unable to bring real transformation to themselves or the world. In each of these examples, we see how the fear of resembling those very shadows, those demons we've so meticulously described, paradoxically causes us to make decisions detrimental to ourselves. We turn away from healthy manifestations of strength, self-worth, conviction, fearing they might be perverted. And it is precisely this rejection, this non-acceptance of our own exiled parts, which could have been a resource, that leads to our best intentions turning into their opposite. This is not malice. It is blindness. Blindness to those parts of ourselves which, being rejected, continue to act from the shadows, sabotaging noble endeavors. It's no wonder that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, those that haven't been purified of the dust of unacknowledged fears and suppressed desires. This is just one side of the coin, just one way our inner exiles distort reality. There's another more subtle projection, which instead of rejection manifests as admiration, as adoration for another's light, unconsciously depriving us of our own. We've previously discussed the invisible threads that connect us to the disowned parts of ourselves, our inner exiles, creating shadows seemingly from the brightest intentions. However, there's another type of shadow no less insidious in its subtlety, and therefore even more dangerous. This isn't darkness, but a blinding light that paradoxically, just as effectively, conceals the truth about ourselves. This is what depth psychology refers to as the golden shadow. Imagine standing before the magnificent mirror of the world, and reflected there is not your face, but an image of perfection embodied in another. This is someone who, for you, is the epitome of a good person, a true spiritual leader, an altruistic devotee whose name is spoken with reverence, whose actions inspire awe. In their radiance, you see something familiar yet unattainable, and in that moment, unknowingly, you perform an act of self-renunciation. You project onto them your own undeveloped gifts, your dormant talents, your unrealized abilities. You voluntarily bestow upon them what is rightfully yours by birth. Pause for a moment and ask yourself the most poignant question. Who is your idol, the object of your boundless admiration in the realm of spirituality, service, or selfless kindness? This could be a real person, a historical figure, or even a composite image woven from your ideals. Now, do you dare to look deeper? What are your own talents? What unrealized abilities? What profound wisdom or strength that you've never dared to claim have you given away to this image? Perhaps it's your own capacity for unconditional love, your inner power to influence the world, your innate wisdom, your right to authentic leadership, your courage to be vulnerable, or even your gift to heal. As long as these qualities reside out there in the aura of someone else's glory, they remain inaccessible to you. You observe them like a work of art behind glass, admiring but unable to touch, unable to embody them in your own life. This is the paradox. You voluntarily become an internal exile from your own endowments, from your true strength. You deprive yourself of the opportunity to be whole, complete, and self-sufficient. Your energy, your potential remains held hostage by an external projection, and a void forms in your soul, which you try to fill with admiration, but not with creation. True transformation begins the moment you realize that what you so genuinely admire in another is merely a mirror reflection of your own as yet dormant potential. The task is not to dethrone the idol, but to reclaim what belongs to you by birthright. This is not an act of appropriation, but an act of self-discovery and self-healing. It is the awakening of dormant giants within, which once integrated will fill your life with authentic meaning and power. It is a return home to your true self. The process of reclaiming these given away qualities requires the courage to look not only at what frightens you, but also at what shines, yet has remained beyond your reach. It opens the path to genuine self-sufficiency, where your inner strength does not depend on external authorities. This return is merely the first step toward creating a whole, integrated personality, capable of carrying light without shadow, living one's truth, and manifesting one's gifts to their fullest extent. But how exactly does this return happen? And what do we do with those parts we have so diligently hidden from ourselves? We have journeyed through a labyrinth of distorted mirrors where bright intentions cast shadows and noble impulses turned into manipulation. We have looked into the eyes of our inner exiles, those parts of our soul that were rejected for the illusion of perfection. But knowledge without action is just another form of inaction. It's time not just to see the shadow, but to engage in dialogue with it, to reclaim what was surrendered to external projections. This new philosophy does not call for a battle against evil or the worship of good. It calls for wholeness, for the understanding that true power resides not in sterile purity, but in the alchemy of opposites. The shadow of the good person is not a curse, but a treasure trove of untapped energy. Pride, the lust for power, hidden judgment, these are all distorted manifestations of vital qualities. Healthy self-esteem, the capacity for leadership, sharp discernment. When we suppress these aspects, they don't disappear. They merely go underground, mutating into destructive forms. Our task is not to eradicate them, but to integrate them, to restore their original undistorted power. This means ceasing to project your inner power onto spiritual gurus, your self-worth onto sacrificial martyrs, and your truth onto all-knowing righteous ones. It means reclaiming all these qualities, purifying them of fear and shame, of social expectations and false moral precepts. So how does one begin this process? How do you draw the inner exile from its secret hiding place and restore its rightful place in the council of your soul? I propose a simple yet powerful exercise, the mirror of good intentions. Practical exercise, the mirror of good intentions. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Take a pen and paper. 1. Recall a good deed. Think of a recent action for which you received praise, felt good, spiritual, or altruistic. This could be anything: helping a friend, volunteering, sacrificing something for another, or offering wise advice. Write it down. 2. Explore the motive. Now, without judgment, with pure curiosity, ask yourself, what did I truly want to gain or avoid with this action? For example, I wanted to be loved. I was afraid of being judged. I wanted to feel needed. I wanted to prove my worth. I wanted to control the situation. I wanted to avoid conflict. I wanted to be seen as a spiritual person. What improper desire or need was hidden behind this good facade? For example, desire for recognition, need for power, fear of rejection, hidden aggression, desire for control. 3. Find the exile. Look at this improper desire. What healthy, vital part of you was suppressed for this desire to manifest in such a distorted way? If it was a desire for recognition, perhaps you suppressed your healthy ambition or sense of self-worth. If it was a fear of rejection, perhaps you suppressed your ability to set boundaries or your vulnerability. If it was a need for control, perhaps you suppressed your leadership strength or capacity for self-determination. Write down this healthy, exiled part. Feel its energy. Reclaim the projection, golden shadow. Recall someone you recently judged for insincerity, pride, manipulation disguised as good, or excessive self-sacrifice. What quality, even if distorted, do you see in this person? For example, a drive for influence, a display of superiority, a need to be needed, persistence. What part of yourself holding this same quality in a healthy manifestation might you have exiled? For example, your ability to influence, your self-confidence, your need for connection, your assertiveness. Imagine yourself reclaiming this quality, cleansed of distortions. Feel it fill you with power. This exercise is merely the first step toward restoring wholeness. It allows you to uncover hidden motives and begin the process of integration. Do not judge yourself for what you discover. Every shadow holds gold, and every inner exile yearns to be accepted. The path to authentic power is the path to self-acceptance, to allowing yourself to be not only good, but whole. And as we gradually reclaim what was discarded, we begin to experience not just inner harmony, but also the ability to act in the world with unprecedented clarity and effectiveness. However, there is yet another aspect rarely discussed when it comes to the path of transformation, an aspect concerning those already on this path and those just beginning to seek their light in the labyrinth of their own soul.